Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you again so much for joining us here at BGR in celebrating Constitution Day and Constitution Week this week. My name is Cristina Kerr. I'm one of the partners and an attorney here at Goff. And I wanted to do a little video to explain a little bit more about the history of the Constitution and explain in a little bit more detail how it is that the Constitution is so important and so innately connected to what we do as injury lawyers and as trial lawyers. Obviously, the Constitution as the backbone of our democracy, it is codified law. We as lawyers practice law, and so the connection there is natural. But the connection runs far broader and far deeper because it, in fact, was a trial that kind of sparked the revolution that ultimately led up to the signing of the Constitution. We all know that the Constitution was the result of a very long fight towards American independence and the American Revolution. And so it's a trial itself that really sparked that revolution that led up to the Constitution. And so we as injury lawyers who will take cases to trial if they don't resolve before trial, that is innately connected to what we do in our jobs and how we protect the rights of our clients. So I want to tell you a little bit more about how that came to be and what that history is. Now, obviously, I'm going to just talk for just a couple of minutes here. There is so much more history on this topic than what I can talk about in just a couple of minutes. So I strongly encourage you to do some of your own research and do some of your own deep diving into this history, because the American history of the Constitution, the American Revolution, and ultimately the right to a trial by jury is so rich and full of information that I can't possibly dive into all of it now. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a summary. And that is, so the American Revolution really kind of started from this spark that came from a trial which occurred in 1735, decades before the ultimate signing of the Constitution in 1787 on September 17th of that year. That trial in 1735 was the trial of John Peter Zenger. John Peter Zenger was a publisher of the journal, of the newspaper, New York Weekly Journal. In 1734, John Peter Zenger published an article openly criticizing a member of the British Crown, a royal governor. And naturally, when that royal governor, who is William Crosby, read that article and found out about that article, he was not too happy and had John Peter Zenger arrested for libel. Now, John Peter Zenger ultimately stood trial and was tried by a jury of his peers for libel. Ultimately, in 1735, when that trial happened, the jury of his peers determined that he wasn't guilty for libel because he published the truth. This decision and this outcome of this case was huge for the American Revolution. And it really was what is referred to as kind of that spark that ignited the flame that carried on the American Revolution. And that's because as a result of this decision, there now was a precedent for colonial publications, colonial newspapers to openly criticize the British Crown and not be penalized, not be punished, as long as what they were publishing was the truth. And so to have this decision lay the groundwork for American colonies to openly criticize and ultimately revolutionize what was going on in the colonies was absolutely huge for the American Revolution and ultimately for the creation and the signing of the Constitution. Now, it's 1735. How is it that we were able to have a trial in 1735? The answer to that question actually goes back hundreds more years by the Magna Carta. Now, the Magna Carta was signed in 1215, and that was the great charter of British government. It is the charter that guaranteed two great pillars of a democratic society: representative government and a trial by jury. And so that Magna Carta that was the backbone of what the colonies were doing really created that right to be able to have a trial by jury. Then later, hundreds of years later, in 1735, which sparked the American Revolution, or fueled the flame for the American Revolution, which ultimately led up to the Constitution and the signing of the Constitution. Where does that lead us to as far as civil juries and the right to trial by jury here in 2025? Well, the right to trial by jury is protected by the Constitution. Not only was it that a trial really sparked and fueled the flame for the American Revolution, but that right, the right to a trial by jury, is in fact codified in the amendment, in the Bill of Rights, which amend the Constitution. In Amendment 7 is the civil right, the right to a trial by jury in a civil case. The Sixth Amendment guarantees the right to a trial by jury in a criminal case. And so the Sixth and Seventh Amendment together guarantee the right to all Americans that if you are facing criminal charges, if you have a civil dispute, you have a constitutional, federally protected right to a jury trial and to a trial of your peers. And so what the purpose of all of this is to I guess, remind everyone that the right to trial by jury is so serious that people fought for their lives over it. It's so serious that it sparked the revolution that formed the backbone of our country. And so this is not something to take lightly. It is something that we as Americans should be incredibly proud to have fought for, to continue to be protected by today. And so, again, I just want to remind all of you, there's a lot more history here than what I can go into and what I have gone into. If you're interested in doing any more of your own research, I would highly, highly encourage that. If you have any questions about what I've talked about or how the Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury trial is still alive and well and protected today, feel free to drop a comment or a question in the comments, and we will address those. Thank you again so much for celebrating Constitution Day and Constitution Week with all of us here at BGR. Take care.